Hi, everybody. My name's Mary Feaster, and this is my action research project. I chose to title mine Hands on Learning Manipulatives in Math. Um, I felt like it was not necessarily a catchy title, but it was kind of short, sweet, to the point, and it already gave you an idea of what my project was about. So, for starters, a little bit about me. I am a kindergarten teacher. I teach in the Central Dauphin School District, but I actually travel. So, I teach AM kindergarten at one building and PM kindergarten at another. And this is actually the smallest group of kids I've ever had. I only have 32 kids total this year. So, I have 20 in the morning and 12 in the afternoon. Numbers are different this year with the pandemic and everything. So, normally I usually have between 40 and 45 kids. So, it's been kind of nice to have a smaller group this year. I can give a little bit more attention to the kids and get to know them a little bit better. So I am in the ACTE program with the STEM concentration, and after this class, I have one more to go, and then I will have my master's. So the purpose of my research study, first of all, I guess my hope was just kind of to have a better understanding of the use of manipulatives in kindergarten math. It's something that, was provided to us by the district. It goes with the curriculum. They gave us these manipulatives, and it's things we've learned about in undergrad and grad school. But I guess I just kind of wanted to have a better understanding of why we use them. Is there really research behind it? Is there data to show that it helps? I guess I was just kind of curious. So again, I kind of just attempted to determine if they really do improve student engagement and knowledge. My district, again, really pushes them heavily. There's a lot of things that they provide to us. So we use them, obviously, but I guess I wanted to see if there was data and research behind this push to use manipulatives and to teach with hands-on materials, especially in younger grades, especially in kindergarten. So again, specifically, my research question was, how does hands-on learning affect student engagement and knowledge of mathematics skills for kindergarten students? And I think everybody knows that, young learners need to have hands-on activities, and it's much easier for them to learn when they can hold something or manipulate something. But I think, again, I just wanted to kind of do my own research and see if I could come up with that same assumption or that same understanding on my own, doing my own research. I wanted to see if I would come to that same conclusion. So, a little bit of background, I just tried to pick a couple things from like three of the different studies that I really, really liked, and I felt like really kind of backed up, again, the importance of understanding what these manipulatives are and why they're used. So, Jones and Tiller had an article, and this was one of the quotes that kind of stuck out to me. They said that research found that using hands on, concrete manipulatives throughout math instruction can lead to higher retention rates and a more positive student attitude toward education in general. Right there, that quote talks about the two things I was focusing on: knowledge, student knowledge. They're talking about higher retention rates, and student engagement. Here, they're talking about students having a positive attitude toward education. If students are having a positive attitude toward education, they're obviously engaged in what they're doing. So I think that quote right there is kind of a great summary of basically my entire research question. And the next one was Math in Motion program. It was a cross-curricular program that incorporated literature, manipulatives, relatable and relevant activities for early learners. So it was kind of multi-domain, which I really liked about the program. And they found that through implementing the program, they took qualitative data using teacher observation, and all the teachers noted that their students' learning was more meaningful and enjoyable. So again, it's not necessarily quantitative data; it's not numerical data to prove this or that, but that qualitative data here is just as important, and they're telling us that students were more engaged, they enjoyed it more, and it was more meaningful to them, which again relates to the student engagement aspect of the manipulatives. And the last thing was this article, again, was a little bit older, but again, I feel like it was actually kind of important that it was older because it shows that manipulatives have been around for such a long time, and there's a reason they're still around. So this one talked about the idea of hands-on math, and they did a study in 7 elementary schools. 4 of them were chosen, and they implemented this program that had manipulatives. And they compared those schools to each other, the 4 compared to the 3 control groups that did not use the manipulatives. And qualitative data was collected, and teacher observations found that students grew a love for math like they had never seen before. And they also noted that their students had greater successes in their mathematical achievements. So again, right there, it's talking about those two things. The students were engaged. They found a love that they had never seen before, and they had had greater success in their mathematical achievement. So their knowledge, they had more improvement in their knowledge. All right. So my design, so I created lesson plans that were teaching the skill of filling in a tens frame correctly. So a tens frame is 5 squares on top, 5 squares on bottom. I give you a number, you draw circles or put circles in to make that number. So the lesson plan was exactly the same, except for the fact that one lesson was taught with manipulative. So there's red on one side, yellow on the other side, counting circles. And the other one was just simply taught with paper and pencil. So they would draw the circles. My morning kindergarten was my control group, and they did not receive the intervention. So they did not get to use manipulatives. They were the paper and pencil group. My afternoon kindergarten was the experimental group, and they did receive the intervention. They did use manipulatives. Now, my numbers obviously varied this year. Normally, I have closer class sizes. This year, it was 20 and 12. So I chose to focus later on when we talk in the findings about the percentages of kids who, the behaviors and things like that, rather than the sheer number. So I created a checklist to collect quantitative data, and that was just strictly used for student knowledge. Were they able to do it? Yes or no? If they did it correctly, I marked it with a check. If they did it incorrectly, I marked it with an X. I also color coded it to show which students used manipulatives and which students did not. I also used a student engagement observation tool, and I marked down on-task and off-task behaviors with a key at the bottom. And this was both quantitative and qualitative, as I got numerical data for the number of behaviors, but I also took anecdotal notes as well. So for my findings, here I have 2 bar graphs, and this is showing the on-task and off-task behavior. So this was used with my student engagement observation tool, and I focused on a half-hour window, and I marked down in 5-minute increments what the students were doing. So if they were listening or watching what I was teaching, I marked it for that 5 minutes. If they were participating in the hands-on activity, I marked it for that. If they were unfocused, listening to others, disturbing others, or playing, I marked that as well. So again, 30-minute time frame, and then I marked them off in 5-minute increments. So what they were doing during that 5 minutes was the behavior that I marked down at that time. So here you can see there's not a huge difference between AM kindergarten and PM kindergarten for their on-task and off-task behaviors. The one thing I wanted to focus on, though, was the actual percentages. Again, my numbers were slightly different. I didn't have as many behaviors for my PM kindergarten because of the fact that I have 8 less children. So out of all of the behaviors total for AM kindergarten, 68% of them were considered on-task behaviors, which is pretty good. Obviously, the students were engaged for the most part. 32% of those behaviors were off-task behaviors. So that would be the unfocused, the listening to others, disturbing others, or playing. For my PM kindergartners who did use manipulatives, out of all of their behaviors, 85% were on task and 15% were off task. So although the bar graph doesn't make it look like it was a huge difference, the percentages show that they are. So my off-task behaviors almost doubled. Actually, they did double for my friends who were not using manipulatives at the time. So this chart just shows the total for both classes together, the number of behaviors total. So obviously you can see from this that overall engagement was not a huge issue for either class, whether or not they had manipulatives. But when you look at the percentages, like I said, 68% on task and 32 off for my kids without manipulatives, and 85 on and 15 off for my kids who did have manipulatives, you can see that there is a difference in the amount of on-task and off-task behaviors when manipulatives were used. The other thing I focused on again was the student knowledge aspect. So here again, I did not see a huge difference. The number of correct with manipulatives was not much greater than the number of correct without manipulatives, and the number of errors did not vary greatly from with manipulatives and without manipulatives. I mentioned in my action research paper that I would be really curious to do this study again with a more difficult math concept, and I would be more curious to see what the results are for the student knowledge aspect if I incorporated manipulatives in something like addition or subtraction. Again, this was simply filling in a tens frame correctly, which is an important skill, that they need to know how to do, especially when it comes to addition and subtraction. But I would be curious to do this all again with a harder skill and to see if the student knowledge varied greatly. So, in conclusion, I learned a lot about the importance of data collection and using appropriate data collection techniques. I went back to a lot of the modules that we discussed data collection techniques, and I watched people's presentations, and I really tried to find data collection techniques that were appropriate for me and for what I was studying. And this really just showed me how important that is. I mean, I think my project went a lot smoother than it could have had I chosen other things or fooled around with other ideas. I think doing a little more research and looking into the data collection techniques really helped me when it came to getting the data. It made it a little bit smoother. I also think this impacted my role as a teacher by showing me that I still have a lot to learn. This again was a learning process for me. I know it was for everybody. But I think a lot of times as the teacher, we think we not know everything, but we think we know better, or, oh, I learned about that before, or I did that, or I've seen that, but putting this into action really showed me that, I can always do better and I can always be better for myself and for my students. And I think with this research that I've done and the data I've collected, I think I could guide my school in a better understanding how important manipulatives are. I think a lot of us just use them because it's what's provided and it's what's expected. But I think if I share this information, it might give people a little bit more insight into why it is so important, especially for those young learners. I also think with future research, maybe other manipulatives could be purchased that are specific to other skills. I think at this point, a lot of the manipulatives we've had for years and years and years. I mean, some of them I remember from when I was in kindergarten. So I think potentially there might be newer manipulatives that might be out there that could be better suited toward my students or toward a certain skill, that could be a little bit more appropriate and maybe even more engaging and help even more with student engagement and knowledge.